We're shooting with the Rebel T7 and the Speedlite 480EX AI. Now, AI part, don't worry about that. We'll get to that probably in another video, but what I want to give you today is why you would use flash and ways to make it look better even when you're outside. So, this is our model, Juliana, and she's going to be modeling for us. Now, we are outside, we're in the shade, and I know you probably think to yourself, why on earth would I need flash when we're outside? There's enough light. But flash is not just about adding more light to your photo, it's about molding the light to your photo. So let's go ahead and just take a picture of Juliana without any flash at all. All right. And it's a little bit bright because I had my exposure compensation up, which just means I'm telling the camera to be a little bit brighter than it thinks it should be. So I'm gonna go ahead and change that. I'm gonna go ahead and hit Q. That allows me to start moving things around and changing. And what's nice is if you just wait on any button, it's gonna tell you what it is. But I'm gonna go here to the exposure compensation and let's set that. Let's just set it to 0. So I don't want my picture to be any brighter or any darker than the camera thinks it should be. All right, let's take another shot because that one was a little bit too bright. Again, my flash is on, but I'm not using it right now. All right, there we go. So this is a pretty great shot, but because I'm not controlling the light, you know, she's got a little bit of darkness in their eyes, you know, they're not bright and vibrant, and her eyes are a gorgeous blue. So here are some options. As soon as you turn the flash on, we're gonna have it set to ETTL, which just means auto for your flash. So let's take a picture just like that. I'm gonna take one vertically, and I'm also going to take one horizontally. Because believe it or not, it makes a little bit of a difference. Now we have a little bit more light in her eyes. They're more bright, vibrant. What's nice is if you're photographing someone who's older and doesn't want, you know, dark circles or wrinkles, when you put a little bit of light into their face using a flash, it's gonna help smooth those out. So, little tip there. All right, so as this is, yes, her face is a little bit brighter, but it's not really looking so natural. So here are some options. Number one, we could spread the light out a little bit more if we want to, and it's gonna dissipate. Let's see what that does. That picture right there, the light is spread out a little bit more. This is helpful. You just bring this down, pull it out and bring it down. This is helpful if you're shooting groups or a bunch of people and you need the light to spread out a little bit further. All right. Now here's a nice little homemade trick that I'm gonna show you. What you can do by pressing the button and pushing it straight, I'm going to show you how to bounce flash even when you're outside. Now this is really only gonna work if you're in close proximity to the person, and it is gonna suck up a lot of your batteries, but you know what? You're gonna like it. All I have here is a white card, and not even totally white, but somewhat white is really all you need. And you can slide it right in here, just like that. By using this as a way to bounce the light off of the card and back in her face, we've created a little bit different light pattern on her face, and it looks a little bit more natural. This camera, the Canon EOS Rebel T7, does come with an on-camera pop-up flash, but you really don't want to use that unless it's an emergency situation, and we'll get to why. This is the kit lens that comes with it, the 18-55, and it is a variable aperture, but don't worry, I'm going to show you how to deal with that. We're actually going to shoot in manual today, and I promise you it won't be super difficult. Now this flash is definitely a level up from the pop-up. This is the Canon 470EX AI. First, let's just start with basic exposure settings when you're working with flash. So the first thing you want to do is get a basic exposure, and you can do it with the flash off if that kind of helps you out to start. We're going to start in manual. We're in a lighting scenario where about 1600 ISO, 1600 ISO is where you want to be. So I've gone ahead and dialed that in. You might want to go a little bit higher if you're in a darker scenario, but with this camera around 1600, you don't want to push it too much further than that, or it's going to introduce a lot of noise into the image. So 1500. Now I've set my aperture to 5.6. The reason being is this lens, as I zoom it in and out, it can only go as low as 5.6 when it's zoomed all the way out. When I have it at the widest setting at 18 millimeters, it does go down to 3.5, but I don't want it to change on me, so I'm just gonna take away the change and just set it to 5.6, so I don't have to worry about that. And the last thing I'm setting is my shutter speed. Now the shutter speed is going to be all the way down at 1/60th of a second. It's a little bit slow if I was shooting just natural light or if I have moving subjects, but the flash is going to help me freeze the action. You might get a little bit of motion blur. In fact, we'll play with that just so you can see what it is, but 1/60th of a second is a good place to start. So that's what we've got. Now, if I take a picture just at these settings, let's see what it looks like. It doesn't look like the worst thing in the world. There's a good amount of light here, but it's not really controlled. What I'm going to do actually is raise my shutter speed because there's too much ambient light right now. Raising the shutter speed will actually darken the ambient light. So I'm gonna go ahead and raise my shutter speed to, let's go to 200th of a second. Take one more shot. Nice. All right, so now we've got some essentially unflattering light, but that's okay because I'm gonna control the light with the flash. So let's go ahead and put the flash on, lock it into place, and turn it on. You won't have to worry about this unless you have this exact model, but I have this set to 0. And there's a custom function in the menu that basically means that the 0 function means you can turn this head around freely at will. So that's where we're starting. I'm gonna take a picture just with direct flash, meaning the flash is pointed directly at her. I'm gonna take it both vertically and horizontally. And you're gonna see why this is really, really bad. So we'll start there. And vertical. Great, okay. There we go. We can see this crazy harsh shadow coming behind her when I shot that vertically, and then horizontally, you don't see it, but it still looks a little bit unnatural. So when you're shooting flash inside, what you want to look for is a nice white wall, which is what we have right here. These flash heads turn and pivot so you can point the flash wherever you like. This is called bounce flashing. Bouncing the light, bouncing the flash. So that's what we'll do. We'll stick with that horizontal position. I'm pointing the light at this wall. It's yellow, so it is going to be a little bit warm of a light, but I think my auto white bounce is going to do a pretty good job. Nice, okay. Now I'm shooting these in live view because it has face detection, and since we're shooting in the dark and there's something kind of contrasting with the pattern behind her, it's not doing a good job focusing without that face detection. So it's a nice feature of this camera. Nice. Hold that there. Wonderful. All right, so now when we're looking at these photos, they're warmer because of the warm wall, but they're also softer with the light because instead of being direct flashing in her face, I'm bouncing it off the wall and just bathing the entire area. So that's a great way to learn flash. Now the cool thing about this camera is you can set it up so that it figures out the best place for the camera flash to bounce, and then when you press the shutter button, it moves itself. But for now, I want to show you one more trick if you can use. Is a pretty fun one, and we're going to go back to just manually turning the camera and flash. All right, the last thing I want to do is introduce using a flash and a reflector, because this can produce some fun light or be what you use if you don't have a lightly colored wall in the area where you can bounce your flash off of. So instead, I'm going to use this. And the further away I have it from my subject, the more of a sharp light source it's going to be. So like sharp shadows, hard shadows are gonna come. So I'm actually just gonna put it right about here and see what happens. I personally like to have the flash tilted not all the way to the side. You could do that, and that's gonna give a little bit harder of a shadow. So let's actually try that first. So that's an option. Or if you wanna come back a little bit less sharp of an angle, tilt it back, and have your flash kind of right there. Nice. I'm gonna go back into live view so I can make sure we got a nice focus. Yay! So that's another way that you can use a reflector and a flash to get just a different type of lighting pattern. I'm going to do that one more time, a little bit zoomed out, just so we have a little bit different of a look. Nice in there. Let's just do one more vertically. I'm gonna go right about there. Here are a bunch of pictures where I've essentially faked that golden hour glow.
Notice the warm tone or the golden haze and the type of feel and warmth that you get across all of these pictures. This is what we're going for. This is what we're gonna fake. None of that is natural light, even though it looks like natural light. So here we go. This is hands down the easiest off-camera flash trick to use. So if you've never tried off-camera flash, this is what you should do first. I promise you, it's super simple. You take any off-camera flash system, so to do that you need to have the trigger that's on your camera and then some kind of flash that can be triggered by that trigger off of your camera. And now you need to change the color. We're going to try to mimic the sun, so you want that warm glow, that warm haze, that sun flare. The only difference is you're creating the sun. Well, what color is the sun? Yellow, orange. So what color gel should you put in front of your off-camera flash? Orange. Now, personally, I like to use 2 CTO gels. CTO is just short for color temperature orange. CTO gels comes in quarter, half, and full, and actually probably eighth also. And I like to use 2 full CTO gels so that it's a really saturated orange color. And if I need to burst out a lot of light from my flash, it's still saturated. A lot of times what happens when people are using gels and the color that comes out of the light isn't as saturated, when you have more flash power coming out of your flash, it desaturates the color. So take your flash and then position your light behind your subject at more of a 45-degree angle. So you can see I have my assistant climbing into the shrubbery here, not only because I want it at that 45-degree angle, but because I also want a lot of that shrubbery and foliage lit. It's not believable if I'm just smacking my subject in the back of the head with the orange glow. If it's really the sun, it's probably going to be hitting more than just the back of her hair, right? It's going to be hitting the grass behind them, the trees behind them. So as far away as you can to mimic that real golden hour glow with the sun nice and low in the sky and hitting as much as you can outside of it. Then what you want to do is set your exposure as if you were just taking a photo of your couple. Expose for the skin tones, because the light that's in the back isn't going to be hitting their skin, right? It's just going to be hitting behind them. So just set your exposure, whether you're doing manual program. Once you have that exposure, turn on your flash. I suggest setting it to TTL, which is through the lens, meaning that your flash is going to use its auto mode and figure out how much power should be pumping out of there. Now, it might be too bright or too dark, and that's fine. This is just to get a starting point. If you don't have a TTL function on your flash, go ahead, set it to manual, and if you're outside, maybe set it to like half power or higher. That's probably a good place to start, and then just adjust it up or down from there. Same thing with TTL. Get that first exposure, that first flash of how bright it thinks it should be, then flip to manual, and then go higher or lower if you want it brighter or darker. Now, sometimes it's not always about brighter or darker, it's about the light position. In this shoot, you'll see at first I did not like the light position. It was only hitting the trees and not really hitting my subject the way I wanted it to. A little adjustment of where the light is placed ensured that I was hitting both the subject with the light as well as the foliage. And you can also just kind of move your feet. Sometimes just moving your angle a little bit creates the look that you're going for. Give this a try. I promise it is the easiest way to start using off-camera flash, because you're really looking at it as a backlight versus a light that's exposing for their face, and then you're fine-tuning it to like shadows and things and whatever. This, you're just adding that warm glow, that warmth behind them, that haze. You could even shoot directly into that flash if you want to create a flare coming out too. Another trick for this, use a longer lens. If you want to create that warm glow, that haze, using a lens like a 135 2.0 as well as my 85 1.4, it helps create that beautiful, dreamy, whimsical type look and really enhances that golden hour glow that we're trying to mimic here. I've got a lot coming for you, but first a little freebie. Download my free posing inspiration guide. You can download it in the link in the description below. Now, I could very easily bounce the light off of these ceilings right here. So let's just do that first, since that's the easiest option. And that's gonna give me a much bigger light source. In addition to it being a bigger light source, it's also going to spread around a lot more. So it's gonna light things like the foreground of this
palm tree. There's palm trees in Jersey, guys. And it'll let me use this as foreground because of that. So I'm not changing my settings at all. Stick it on TTL. Let's see what we got. Oh, immediately it looks better, more natural. The light is going everywhere. It's softer. Let's go ahead and switch to manual. That locks in my power setting for me. Now let's have some fun, shall we? So cute. Let me go ahead and get some foreground in here. I'm just gonna go over here, go look towards him. Nice. Now this foreground is evenly lit too. Do some sniffing. Nice. Just went for a more shallow depth of field here to really get what I was going for with this foreground. Lovely. All right, perfect. So that's it. That's how easy it can be to shoot. Now let's just say if you want to shoot that natural light but don't have this to bounce off of, well, instead bounce off of something like this. And this is going to give you a nice big soft light. This is the Deep White Large Umbrella by Profoto. Slap on a diffuser so it just spreads the light even more. And we're going to get very similar results. So I just want to take a few like this, just so, you know, in case you don't have a nice white ceiling to bounce it off of, you've got this option. Now you might be saying, why would you do this when it's actually a nice soft light outside? Well, it's soft light, but it's giving them raccoon eyes unless I do this. It's also raining, so I can't go into the light spot that I want and get the background to be the foliage. Lots of reasons why I would decide this instead of actually shooting natural light. I'm gonna raise this up a little bit, right about there. We'll set it to TTL again because the exposure or the power setting we need from the flash is gonna change. Bring your dress kind of like in this way, almost like you're sort of cuddling up with him. Yeah. Again, I'm going high up here with the camera to avoid that horizon line that I'm getting. This is looking much more natural. So go ahead and do the exact same thing. Perfect. Kind of give her that bear hug from behind. Yeah, that's cute. Yep, you can snuzzle her. Just playing with all the foreground that I can here. Oh my God.
Oh, I thought it was fake light. I thought it was your light. Just like that.
And just like that, it's gone. Another reason to use flash, so it doesn't go away. All right, that is perfect. And just snuzzle her again, like whisper in her ear. Yeah. Perfect. I think we got it. We got a lot of nice natural looking shots by making our light modifier really, really big instead of really small, and balancing the ambient exposure with the light, so one is not too much brighter than the other. Today we are playing with some fun gels and these A1Xs. These are the magnet gels and have lots of colors. So let's do red and blue and make purple and see what happens. Pop that gel on, and ideally what I do with this is this just becomes kind of more of a fill light on this side. Well, that is her main light, and then somewhere in there it'll mix and create a little bit of purple. I think. I've never done this. This is now the party house, guys. Oh. Make crazy faces. Yeah. Cute. Do you have headphones? Can you borrow his headphones?
Oh, I was like, what's happening?
Yeah, just put them over, like pretend like you're DJing. Yeah, yes, yes, perfect. Oh, I love it. Let's do that. Nice. I think we got it. I'm good. We got so much fun stuff. I love it when we get fun stuff. Wait, we have canned fog, atmosphere aerosol. What were we thinking? Exactly. All right, go ahead, spray it up. We put the light behind so we can actually see the smoke. Just go, keep spraying. So we're turning off the lights so we can see more of the smoke, and this is working perfectly. So lowering my main light, but still keeping it on. So we get just a kiss of light. Cute, more up. Nice, I think we got it and we're all choking. For this specific shot, I knew I wanted to be outside. The sun was kind of low in the sky, but I wanted to give it that extra little something. I definitely wanted it to look saturated, a little bit angular. I didn't want it to look harsh. I knew I had to match the sun and an off-camera flash to get the kind of look that I was going for. My first step was to photograph not only the background and the exposure that I wanted for the background, but also the exposure that I wanted as the secondary light source for my model. When you're shooting outside and you're trying to use off-camera flash in some kind of two-point lighting setup, here's what you want to think about. I like to have the sun as the backlight. Why? Because if it's a cloudy day and the sun just is going in and out, you're really only losing your hair light and a little bit of the background. But if you were flipping it around and you had the sun as your main light source, your key light that's lighting your subject's face and it's going in and out, now you're kind of screwed and your exposure is going all over the place. And if you're compensating for it, then you're changing the way the background looks and the whole photo looks, and it's just a mess. So your sun, you're going to think of it as your secondary light source that's not lighting your subject's faces, and position your subject so that it's lighting the back and being a hair light, being that second dimensional light. After you have your positioning of your model and your exposure so that the background looks good and that the sun is not blowing out on your subject, now you can set up your second light. For this scenario, I have the Profoto B10. I know what you're thinking, Vanessa, you're fighting the sun. Why aren't you using the Profoto B10 Plus or something that's a little bit brighter, like the B1 perhaps? Don't worry, I was shooting vertical, so I knew I could get the light pretty close to my model. I used TTL to get my initial flash power setting and then switched to manual and adjusted up or down as necessary. I wanted to turn the bride's face totally towards the light so that the light would go in her eyes and I would also see the cheekbones and her jawline. This also created a really nice distinct difference between the light, the flash, and the sun. I made sure that the flash was pretty much to a 90-degree angle, maybe a little bit less to my subject, so that shadow would kind of go down the middle of the subject. It just makes it very obvious that there are two light sources, and that's what's giving this photo that little something extra. The flash isn't too bright, so it's not too harsh, and it's able to meld into the scene to create something that, hey, I'm pretty proud of. So let's go ahead and turn this on. I have this set to TTL just like I did with the other light, but instead of it coming from one side, it's gonna bounce off all of this white that I have here. That might work, might not, might produce something different, but let's give that a try first. Let's take a test shot. All right, so let's take a couple shots. You're gonna do the exact same thing, kind of turn a little bit this way, that way, yep, and then let your head go back this direction. Beautiful. Gorgeous. All right, so this looks pretty good. In fact, arguably, this looks a little bit softer because I'm bouncing off a much larger light source. But the point of this video was not to create a larger light source. It was to create a similar look to on and off camera flash. So what do we have to do here? We have to get this flash to basically be the same size as the flash that we used off camera, which was a 2-foot octa about 10 feet away from our subject. So what we're gonna do, we're going to take this Lastolite Triflector and I'm going to bounce only into this reflector. So that's going to give us a little bit more similar of a shape as a 2-foot octabox off camera. Let's give it a try. So to do this effectively, definitely need an assistant would be nice, but we don't have one today. So I'm just going to make sure that my camera angle is exactly where I need it to be when I hold up the flash. So I kind of take a look and test that and make sure we're about where we need to be. Nice. I think I like this option better. Let's just take a couple more. This looks great. Beautiful. Nice. Stay just like that while I zoom in my lens a whole bunch. Perfect. And then look at me. Love it. Good. Whew, now that is gonna make your hands shake just a little bit because it's pretty heavy of a system, but it's definitely a good option. So if you take a look at these photos here, there's very little difference between what we did off camera and what I did on. Now, there is a difference, of course, but this is a great option if you were in a room that was completely dark and you couldn't bounce flash off of the walls like we were able to. Instead, take your reflector, you can hand hold it if you want to, have an assistant hold it, or even put it on a stand and get a similar look. It's definitely a good option when you're sort of stuck and you don't have an off-camera flash. Hope you enjoyed taking a look at everything, and one of these options might work well for you. My name is Vanessa Joy. Make sure you hit subscribe, ring the bell. That's the most important part. And of course, leave some love, and I'll see you next time. Bye.